What's up, all you Jesus-loving Bible nerds? Welcome to First Methodist Youth. This is week 3 in our series on families and specifically dealing with conflicts with our families. Last week, we talked about praying for our families and how that can be a good first step in resolving conflict with them. But let's be honest, if it were that easy, going home for the holidays would look a lot more like a Hallmark movie and a lot less like the Thunderdome. At least that's what holidays with my family looks like. I don't know what, I ain't judging yours at all. Prayer is great. 9 out of 10 pastors recommend. But it's not going to solve every issue. You're going to have a conversation eventually. And I mean an actual conversation, not a passive-aggressive subtweet or texting them from your room. And let's face it, these can be tough conversations to have. Maybe you did something wrong and you are ashamed or afraid of how the other person is going to react. Maybe you're the one who's been wronged and you just want them to admit that they did something wrong or understand where you're coming from, or if we're just being honest with ourselves, we're just being stubborn. But God doesn't really give us a choice here. It's easy to forget that the Bible is not just the story of God trying to be cool with humans again. It's the story of God trying to get humans to be cool with each other again. And He is always calling us towards restoring those broken relationships. That's the only way this works, if we're willing to value our relationships over winning the argument. And this is going to involve some tough conversations. So we're going to look at a story in the Bible that can show us how we can better navigate those conversations. But first, pause this video. I've got some questions for you guys to discuss with your small groups. Number 1, what are some of the reasons your family might need to have a tough conversation? Number 2, what's the longest amount of time one of your fights have lasted with a family member, and what started the fight and how did it end? And then number 3, how often does your family have tough conversations, and what are those conversations even like? Go ahead, pause this video, discuss that with your small group. We will be right back. Welcome back. I was just getting some coffee while you were away. I'm just kidding, I never left here. It's the magic of editing. So let's just jump into this week's hot mess of a family. We're talking about 2 brothers again, and thankfully, this one doesn't end in murder. Is it weird that we're only this far into the Bible and I've already had to say that? So Jacob and Esau are the grandkids of Abraham, and God tells their parents, Isaac and Rebekah, right off the bat that with these 2, it's gonna hit the fan. This story is interesting because the main character is arguably the villain for the first half of it, but his parents named him Jacob, which in Hebrew literally means deceiver. So how did you think that was gonna play out? Hey, props to Jacob though, because he owns it. Okay, I probably should give him props for that. But it's pretty clear early in the story that Esau is Dad's favorite. He's basically the jock, and his dad is way too invested in his football career. And Jacob is the quiet, shy kid who just wants to show his dad the piece of macaroni art that he made. So Jacob decides to live up to his name and cheats his brother out of his inheritance and blessing. And he does it all by tricking his old, blind father, no less. Esau is understandably upset by this, so Jacob decides to dip out of town, and our story picks up years later. At this point, Jacob has a wife and child, and he's eaten some humble pie, and now he knows he's got to come home and he's got to face up to what he did to his brother. So let's just see how this goes. This is Genesis 33, starting in verse 1. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. And he put the servants with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went out before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then they all come near and meet their long-lost uncle, right? And Esau said, this is picking up again in verse 8, Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I met?" Jacob answered, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." Just a little back note here. There's like a whole chapter before this of Jacob just trying to soften up Esau by like sending him a bunch of gifts, which like, I mean, it's a smart move. That's what I do whenever I'm about to, have a tough conversation with my parents. But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please. If I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God. You have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Thus he urged him, and Esau took it. So there are a million ways this meeting could have gone badly, but thankfully it goes well. And I think it actually gives us a good model for the type of attitude that we should have when we are approaching these tough conversations, whether we are the ones who have been wronged or we are the ones who are in the wrong. Esau would have every right to be furious in this situation, but he doesn't hold it against Jacob. He doesn't try to get even. He doesn't even ask for an apology. All he wants is to restore his relationship with his brother. And Jacob, for his part, has the humility to own up to what he's done wrong and try to make it right. He doesn't let fear or shame or just plain stubbornness keep him from apologizing and asking for forgiveness. Now, obviously, this is like the gold standard, right, for how we want these conversations to go, where everything is forgiven and you hug it out and have a nice cry, but this is not usually how it goes. So how do we have these tough conversations well? How do we keep these tough conversations from turning into arguments and the reason for the next tough conversation? First, be patient when they're sharing their perspectives and their feelings. Even if you feel like their feelings aren't valid, remember the point of this is not to win an argument, it's to understand where they're coming from. So listen, ask questions, and just be patient. Second, be honest about what you feel, even if it's tough. I remember I used to get into tons of fights with my parents when I was a teenager because I felt like they were being too controlling. But deep down, I was really just hurt because I felt like they didn't trust me to make good decisions on my own. When I was able to be honest with them about that, we honestly ended up having a really awesome conversation that changed our relationship for the better, even to this day. Third, be willing to admit when you're wrong. I would even take this a step further and say, assume that you've done at least something wrong and try to apologize for it, even if you feel like you really haven't. In my experience, people are a lot less defensive and a lot more willing to own up to their own mistakes when they see you doing the same. Finally, value your relationship more than being right. And this isn't something that you can decide in the heat of the moment. You have to meditate on this long before you even begin having those tough conversations. But at the end of the day, that's what all of this is about, is reconciling and restoring those broken relationships. And having these tough conversations is an essential step to that. Even if the other person doesn't respond as well as you would like, you'll know that you've done everything in your power to restore the relationship, and it might just be the first step to further healing down the road. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. If you are meeting with your small group, you guys can go ahead and close this video and get to that. If you're not, I highly encourage you to watch this with your family and have a conversation about it. Either way, I miss y'all. I love y'all's faces. Stay safe, stay sane, wash your hands. Peace.